Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I'm here with our expanded deck analysis for the week, for the current format, not including Breakpoint. So this will be one of the last ones we do, not including Breakpoint, but we do realise that Breakpoint isn't legal for the next few weeks, so there will be a couple more uh, expanded deck analysis videos up to Breakthrough, and then it's just going to be Breakpoint. But yeah, today we're going to be looking at a deck that's been coined Rainbow Road, simply for all of the different types of Pokemon it plays. It actually plays all 10 types of Pokemon, which is pretty insane. So yeah, I'm going to jump into it. All of the Pokemon have sort of their specific use, so I do have a couple of little notes down just below me, just because all of them are important for some reason or another, so I want to make sure I tell you about all of their importances. And don't miss anything out, which is the main thing. But we are indeed going to start with Xerneas. Xerneas is sort of the star of the deck. This Rainbow Force attack doing 10 damage plus 30 more for each different type of Pokemon on your bench. So pretty much for every different colour of the rainbow you've got on your bench, you're going to be doing 30 more damage. And this really increases quite quickly. You might look at it initially and think, oh, only just 10 damage, not great. But 30 damage for every different type, that really amounts up really quickly. And with 5 types, you're doing 160, so you can really reach those numbers, really reach EX numbers pretty quickly, and of course we can extend ourselves to make Rainbow Force do 180 without even getting Skyfield and any more Pokemon in play, just with the Muscle Band, so that's really nice. It's the main attacker of the deck, 120 HP, on a non-EX is okay, it's nothing great, but it's nothing to sniff at all. The resistance to Dark type is quite nice. Yveltal is obviously really big in expanded because Yveltal Archeops is such a consistent and like hard-hitting sort of deck at the moment. Having the resistance to 20 is really nice. It can mean they really have to extend with Yveltals to be able to just knock out these Xerneases, and that's when cards like Deden really come into play. Deden is a really nice card to deal with Yveltal. Obviously, lightning type, so it's got weakness, and energy short, doing 20 damage times the amount of energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, meaning that if they stack a huge Yveltal up just to deal with one of these Xerneas, you can energy short them sort of like a mini X-Ball on your own side, and do huge amounts of damage to be able to knock them out in one hit pretty much all the time because you have weakness. Not X-Ball, Evilball. Because you have weakness, it's really nice. Entrainment is also one of the ways we can get around Vespiquen and Vileplume if we do come up against any Vespiquen and Vileplume decks. It's not quite as popular in Expanded as Standard, I don't believe, but this is our out to be able to then get even more Pokemon and avoid being benched by Vespiquen and Vileplume, because that's pretty much one of their main win conditions, just to bench the opponent rather than take 6 prizes. So Entrainment is a really nice card for doing that, along with things like Fan Club that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Next up, I'm going to start right at the beginning. We've got Dredigan. Dredigan is a nice revenge attacker. Revenge doing 20 damage plus 70 more if something was knocked out the previous turn. So a really nice DC attack for 90. It's good. It's a good against non-EXs basically. Night March it really doesn't mind facing. Even with just a DCE and a Muscle Band, Revenge knocks out Joltik without even having to have one of your Pokemon knocked out before. So it can deal with Joltiks. The 90 damage does deal with all of the other Night Marches and Vespiquen. So Dredigan is a really nice card against and sort of any of these not really hard-hitting non-EX decks, because pretty much as soon as you lose, you go down a prize, Dredigan can always trade at least 1-for-1 against one of these non-EX decks, so it's a really nice card for those sort of situations. And 90 damage just for a DCE after having one of your opponents, one of your Pokemon knocked out, is always just nice if you don't have really any other response, like you don't have a response with Xerneas or anything like that. Next up, obviously, Shaman is Shaman, being able to set up. We all know what this guy does. Again, we have access to Sky Return if we need it because we have DCEs. Drawing is really good with this deck. You happily sort of bench it, and it's another card that increases Rainbow Force's damage as well. So that's really important. And a similar thing goes for Jirachi, being able to have access to search for a supporter turn 1, maybe a Getsis or the Fan Club, to get you into another Pokemon. Always really useful. Chorus also has amazing value in this deck, so being able to search out the turn 1 Chorus after you've benched a load of Pokemon is really strong. And then we have Hooper, which kind of fits all of the X's together. There are a couple of X's we haven't gone over, but Hooper is the one that is going to bring all of the X's into our hands, so we can use things like the Jirachi's Stellar Guidance and Setup without having to waste Ultra Balls for each of these different Pokemon. We can just Hooper for 3 more Pokemon. Plus, with Hooper, you have the Psychic type. You then get 3 X's of 3 different types. You're actually adding 120 damage, so playing Hooper sort of adds 120 damage to your output straight away, which is really, really nice. Obviously, as I go along, each of these different Pokemon have a different type. The only cross type we have is we have one Smeargle as well as one Shaman, meaning that we do have 2 colourless Pokemon, but that's not too much of an issue most of the time, because we can reach for the numbers we need to, and then sometimes we will have a bench space spare if we need to, as we are playing Skyfield, so we can indeed just bench the Smeargle or the Shaman, whichever one we haven't benched so far, just to be able to carry on doing what we're doing. So yeah, the Hooper is really, really strong just for getting an extra 120 damage basically, but of course it does search out your Shaman and some of the other EXs like Landorus and Keldeo as well, which is really nice. The Smeargle is pretty useful for some of these awkward energy types. Obviously you can see we have quite a weird energy list at the moment. We've got 4 DCE, 4 Psychic, 3 Dark and 2 Fighting. Xerneas needs Fairy to... not Psychic, I'm talking about Psychic, I mean Fairy. Xerneas needs Fairy to attack, but having Darkrai in the deck also means we have free retreat when on anything we have Dark type that has Dark type energy. So if we do need to retreat out, we can attach an energy and then use Second Coat to switch it with a Dark energy in the discard, just to be able to sort of get free retreat as and when we need it, which is really, really nice. It does, obviously, the Pokemon will have to be active, but if we're attaching a Dark to it, it's going to be active just because we need to be retreating with it. It's also really nice for responding with a Xerneas the next turn if one goes down, because you can throw up a Xerneas, and all you need, as long as it's got a DC on it, you can attach any type of energy and then switch it with a Fairy energy. So it kind of makes your Dark energy and Fighting energy outs the Fairy energy as well, to be able to respond with a Xerneas as long as you only have to attach one energy to it. That being said, we do have ways of attaching more energy using Ho-oh. Ho-oh's Rebirth is a really, really powerful ability, especially if you can flip heads on it. When it's in the discard, you may choose once during a turn flip a coin. If heads, you put Ho-oh onto the bench, and then attach 3 basic energy of 3 basic energy from the discard onto him. Which is kind of another of our ways of acceleration. As you can see, we do indeed run 4 energy switch, meaning that we can throw the Ho-oh up, throw the Ho-oh in the discard, with an Ultra Ball or a Compressor, get some energy in the discard as well, then use Rebirth and attach the energy back on, and then hunt for our energy switches to be able to power up Xerneas' turn 1. This deck can turn 1 opponents. It's pretty strong. I don't have all that much experience with the deck. I haven't played it I've played against it more than I've played with it. But that being said, I have had a few games, and I do know like the general strategy. And I have seen that you can get Rainbow Force doing huge damage on turn 1 if you can flip well with Ho-oh and then grab your energy switches as and when you need them. So like I said, Dark Cloak is a really, really strong ability. It gives free retreat to pretty much everything that has a Dark type energy on it, or if you've got a Dark in the discard, pretty much anything that you can Second Coat to, which is really nice. And I think it becomes even stronger when you do have access to Second Coat as well. And obviously it's another type to be able to do more damage with Rainbow Force with. Moving on to Landorus, we all know how good Landorus is. It's really good for early game pressure. That's why we have dedicated some slots to Fighting energy. And because it is only 2 energy, it's not all that much of an issue, because we do have Second Coat if we need it. If we can discard a Fighting energy, it does mean basically any of our energy are Fighting, because we can just use Second Coat to switch them. But yeah, Landorus, obviously, as well as having the plus 30 for the damage on Rainbow Force with Xerneas, if we don't hit the Xerneas turn 1, Hammerhead applies some really sort of scary pressure on our opponents. Obviously, things like Joltix don't want to see this at all. With Muscle Band, you can one-shot combis as well. So it really sort of puts pressure on our opponent. And yeah, it's just really good against some of these really low HP basics. Obviously, another one that's doing quite well at the moment is Milotic, and Feebas again only has 30 HP. So being able to hammerhead and take cheap prizes really early on in the game can just sort of push you into the winning the prize race, essentially. I've talked a lot about Ho-oh, but yeah, we're running it for rebirth pretty much and the extra damage. This is your out to being able to turn one, because you can't attach the energy and the fairy energy and the DCE, so you do need to be able to use rebirth and then energy switch off to actually reach that turn one Rainbow Force for huge damage. But with 2 Ho-oh and 4 energy switch, it is more common than you would think. With 2 Ho-oh, it means we have 2 outs to be able to flip coins, and if one's prized or something, we're not completely out of energy acceleration. Ho is pretty much always your first turn battle compressor target, just to be able to carry on running through the deck and hopefully going for a rebirth later on. You're pretty much going to go for sort of a Ho-oh and 2 energy, or a Ho-oh and energy and a supporter, something like that, just to be able to pull off this turn one as often as possible and get huge damage with Rainbow Force as and when you can. Egg is probably the most sort of out there card that you can see. Obviously, really good synergy with things like Computer Search and Ultra Ball, but it is actually an extra 30 damage. It's like a plus power for 30 if you need it, as long as it's in the discard, because you can propagate it back from the discard into the hand and drop it on the bench for an extra 30, which means that we sort of have access to an extra 30 damage as and when we need it, as long as we have bench space for it, which with 4 Skyfield we should have a lot of the time. So yeah, obviously, like I say, the synergy with things like Computer Search and Ultra Ball are really nice as well. But all of the things that all of the different Pokemon types pretty much all revolve around doing extra damage with Rainbow Force. So that's another reason why we do have Execute in here. It's also probably the best grass type to have at the moment that is at least relatively splashable. Things like Virizion wouldn't really work because we're not running grass energy, and it's just a catcher target. Whereas this, the Execute, if you don't need it for damage, you can use it as well. You can use it anyway as fodder for Computer Search and Ultra Ball, but you don't mind using it as just that, and if you don't hit the damage, that's fair enough. So or if you don't need the damage, that's fair enough. You've got some value out of it with Computer Search anyway. So I feel this card is more valuable than you would first think, because even if you don't need the extra 30 damage, it still gets value with some of these other cards that we're running. I've spoken about the other 3, so the last Pokemon to talk about is Keldeo. Keldeo is pretty much the biggest way we're going to be rushing it. We're going to be retreating. That's what you want to be pairing with Darkrai. You want to be attaching pretty much any energy, and then just attaching, and then either second coating or actually having a dark energy, just to be able to rush in and free retreat. The dark energy when Darkrai is on the bench basically means Keldeo has a float stone, which is obviously an insane combo that we've seen for so long. So you're only really going to be using Dark Cloak if you don't have access to Keldeo, but this is going to be your main sort of second coat target if you want to have a dark energy on the board to be able to free retreat, because this gives all of our Pokemon free retreat essentially, and again it's just even more damage, so it's really nice. Also gets us out of status conditions as well. We know how big Hypnotoxic Laser is. Hypnotoxic Laser is probably one of the best cards that has been printed in a very long time, so it kind of means that we don't have to worry as much about the sort of imminent status conditions that we can eventually see, or we always see in Expanded, just because of how good Hypnotoxic Laser is. So yeah, it's really good. Something I forgot to mention with the Den, now looking at Keldeo, is it's also another Pokemon that can do really well against Archie Blastoise, or Archiestoise, because they build up a huge Keldeo to just continually be able to deal with your Pokemon. Deden is another one that can. Deden is an attacker that can sort of punish the Keldeo, just because they stack so much energy on. You can get a huge chunk of damage just for a little 70 HP basic. So yeah, looking at the Keldeo reminded me of Deden's use in that matchup as well. Moving on to the trainers. For Battle Compressor, you're going to be going for energy, you're going to be going for Ho-oh, you're going to be going for your techie supporters, things like that, pretty much all the time. That's why we're running 4. We want to be getting as many of these battle compressors as we can in a turn, or on turn one, just to have as many outs with Ho-oh as possible. We want to, if possible, get 2 Ho-oh in the ditch, 3 energy in the ditch, so we get maximum value from rebirth if we need it. And then any supporters that we want to use turn one, or some of these more techie ones, things like the Fan Club and the Getsis, maybe we don't want to use them straight away, so we're going to just throw them away to be able to pick them up with VS Seekers later on. The computer search is like this deck is pretty combo based, having a lot of pieces on the bench to be able to do huge damage. It's not as combo based as some of the other decks in the format, or some of the other decks that aren't even in the format, just sort of theory mon. It's not all super combo based, but you do need a lot of different Pokemon out at once, so sometimes the computer search can act as like a 5th Ultra Ball to be able to search for that final 30 damage that you need to be able to knock out your opponent's EX on turn 1. But then again, it gets into another compressor, or it gets into a compressor, gets into things like energy switch as well, which is really strong. All of these little pieces that can sometimes lead you to the turn 1 just that little bit easier is really nice, and computer search is the best way of doing that, just because it's the most consistent. And with egg and things like Ho-oh and the energy, you don't mind discarding them straight away, because you can easily rebirth them or propagate them back into your hand, and not really lose value from any of these cards. Obviously, the 4 energy switch, pretty much solely used with rebirth. When you get a good rebirth with Ho-oh onto the bench, you then are going to use 1 or 2 energy switch just to try and spread your energy around, just so one Ho-oh isn't a sitting duck waiting to be Lysander killed, because it's only got 160 HP, and if it takes away all of your energy, yes, it can get it back on, but you want to be getting your energy onto your attackers rather than just leaving it on the Ho-oh. That being said, you sometimes can leave some energy on the Ho-oh. It's okay, but you want to be finding these energy switch turn 1 just to be able to get 1 or 2 attackers set up if possible. Then again, things like the Keldeo with free retreat, not float stone, but it does have free retreat with the dark energy if Darkrai's out. So yeah, you want to be using your energy switch just to sort of spread your energy about and make sure you have maximum board set up. To be able to follow up the next turn. We do have a lot of Pokemon, so Super Rod is really useful, but we do sometimes go a little bit ham with discarding energy as well, and we often don't really want energy in our hand. That's not always ideal, because we can only attach 1 from our hand per turn, but with Ho-oh we can rebirth to get 3 more onto the board, and then use energy switch to get them off, so sometimes they are better in the discard. But after a couple of attackers have gone down, maybe you want to be super rodding a couple of energy back in just to ensure you can draw into them for the last 2 or 3 prizes that you're going to take. And then obviously this is another out to be able to getting damage back as well. If we maybe prize a Xerneas, things like that, just being able to get more damage back and have more attackers later on in the game. Super Rod is just really useful. For Ultra Ball, obviously we know how many, there's so many different Pokemon in here. Any deck with Hooper gets immediate value from Ultra Ball, especially this deck, which basically gives it a plus 120 damage. So Ultra Ball is super good in this deck. It searches for Hooper, which searches for 3 more Pokemon, which searches for 120 damage, plus things like Setup and Stellar Guidance and Rebirth, things like that. Obviously, Ultra Balls get so much more value with Hooper, and in general, just being able to search for that key attacker that you need in the matchup, maybe the Deden for Yveltal, things like that. Just having 4 makes it really easy to get them when you need them, whether it be turn 1 or whether you're just looking for that last prize later on in the game. For VS Seeker, we know what this is all about. We do have some very techie supporters in here, things like the Getsis. We only have a few one-offs, so we're just going to throw them away, really. And that being said, it means we have access to them later on, especially if we sort of battle compressor them away to get into our Pokemon and our Sycamores, things like that, rather than running into things like N and Lysander on turn 1 when we want to be getting even more cards than what N, and obviously Lysander can't get you cards, but what N can do. So these kind of supporters, these 3 here, maybe the Fan Club as well, things like that, are often going to be sort of ditched straight away with battle compressor, so it's important to be able to get them back. AZ is really nice, obviously, with not only also pretty much all 3 of these Pokemon here. Jirachi for searching for another supporter for next turn. Shaman setting up is really nice, and Hooper in general can then search for another 90 damage. If you go, or not, yeah, it can search for another 90 damage because you can get sort of these three here, and then with Hooper you can then pick it up and drop it back down for a Darkrai, Landorus, and a Ho-oh if you really are pushing for damage and you don't want to risk the rebirth flip. It can search for another 90 damage, which is really nice. Also, if you don't have the Dark Cloak or the Keldeo, it is another nice way of being able to pick up or retreat out of the active effectively, which is well, it's the only other way we have of doing that. So it's really nice to have another out to be able to do that as well. Colress gets insane value in this deck, simply because your bench is so big all of the time. Your damage comes from a big bench, so you are going to have a lot of bench Pokemon a lot of the time, and pretty much Colress is very often not going to be less than a 7 or 8 card shuffle draw, which is really good. That's also why we're only running 2 Sycamore as well, because on turn 1, Colress can be just as strong as Sycamore, or Juniper, sorry, can be just as strong, even stronger, because shuffle draw is often stronger than discard draw, just because you're preserving resources as well. So yeah, that's the Choruses kind of work as Ultra Balls, not Ultra Balls. The Choruses kind of work as Sycamores, especially with things like Hooper getting even more Pokemon out as well. Hooper just does so many good things for this deck. It's so good. It does damage. It searches for draw. It increases your draw with Chorus. It's really good. Getsis is another thing for Archie Stoys that is really useful, but Maxi builds as well. Getsing against a Maxi build sort of puts them, makes their combo a lot harder to pull off, especially against Archie builds that run things like Ultra Ball and Superior Energy Retrieval to try and discard cards out of their hand to be able to use that Archie turn 1. Shuffling them back into your opponent's deck is really annoying for them, and is one of the surefire ways we can really increase our Archie and Maxi matchup, just because they really struggle getting the combo out. If you get rid of all of their items turn 1, they're often relying on a top deck unless they've got a lot of insta-play cards. And then in other situations, when you don't have another supporter to play, Getsis may not be a bad play. Just even if you don't get many trainers, maybe only 1 or 2 trainers, but at least you see what your opponent's got in their hand, so you kind of know what to expect next turn. And you can kind of predict what they're going to do from there. So it's always nice having knowledge of your opponent's hand, and Getsis can do that, but it's mainly in here to be able to deal with Archie and Maxi, but it makes those matchups a lot nicer, because you're not worried about them pulling off the combo turn 1 anywhere near as much as you would be if they had the items turn 1 and you couldn't get the Getsis. Lysander, we don't really need 2 Lysander in here. The Xerneas does have the damage to knock out anything in the active, but the deck really does want to be taking prizes on EXs. It doesn't like training its non-EXs too much, so you're more often than not going to be going for 3 EX knockouts rather than 6 non-EX knockouts. Obviously this isn't possible in some matchups, but more often than not you are going to be Lysandering just on that last turn to take maybe a Shaman out or something like that as the final 2 prizes, just because it makes the prize trade a lot nicer if you can do this sort of thing and be able to Lysander EXs rather than have to go through whatever they throw up. We don't need to, like I say, because you can actually pretty much knock out anything in the active with Rainbow Force, provided you have a big enough bench. But always having access to 1 is really nice and definitely really useful. 1 N, just because of how strong N is, to be quite honest with you, we all know what N does. It's kind of a redundant point. We all know how good N is, and it's very rare that you won't see N in expanded decks nowadays. Just shuffle draw is so strong. Fan Club is really nice because all of our Pokemon are basic. It's search for 2 Pokemon, which is nice, and obviously this also increases damage. So this can be used early game to try and increase damage for that turn 1 knockout. Avoid being benched, which is another important thing. But it also can be used late game just to grab those last 2 Pokemon that you need to be able to knock out the Mega EX they've thrown up or something like that, which is really important. There's obviously synergies with things like Hooper as well, because Fan Club then turns into search your deck for 5 Pokemon, because you get something like a Deden and a Hooper, and then with the Hooper you then get three more EXs. So Fan Club gets insane value again with Hooper. I could go on and on about Hooper, but it's really really good. But I think you guys probably understand how good this card is at the moment. Well, by now at least. And then two Juniper. Like I said, the Chorus is often as good, if not better sometimes, than Sycamore, so we don't need to run 4. It also kind of clunks up the deck. If we do, it means we're discarding maybe Pokemon that we don't want to discard, things like that. So it is often outclassed by Chorus, especially as you're preserving resources as well, which is really, really nice. But we do have to, just because of how strong the discard draw mechanic is. I still believe it is the best supporter in format. I do just think it is outclassed by Chorus because of the deck style rather than the card in general. It's just because we always do have a large bench. You are often going to be getting more value out of Chorus than you would normally be. 3 Skyfield. Obviously, this is another out to be able to do even more damage. With a full bench and Skyfield, we can actually do 250 damage, which one-shots a Wailord, which is pretty crazy. And then 270 if the Wailord has a hard charm, I suppose, if we attach one of our 2 muscle bands. So, yeah, that's really important. We don't need 4, simply because with a full bench and a muscle band, we one-shot an EX anyway. So the Skyfield sort of just secures mega matchups, really. But having access to a bigger bench is always obviously more useful than having to rely on finding that muscle band and then retaining it next turn, which is it can be really, really crucial. And obviously, you know what muscle band does. It adds 20 to our Xerneas, meaning it can one-shot with a full bench without Skyfield. Also means we can one-shot Shamans with Revenge if we get knocked out the previous turn with a Druddigon, which is nice. And just an extra 20 damage here and there is always really, really useful and can sometimes sort of sway the game a little bit. Finally, the energy that we're running. Pretty much everything, or a lot of our main attackers are DC compatible. Things like Shaman, Druddigon, the Xerneas, all of them are DC compatible. And then the only other attacker we're really going to be using is Landorus, so we do have 2 fighting for the Landorus as well. The Fairy are in here just to be able to meet this requirement of 1 Fairy to use Rainbow Force, and then the 3 Dark, like I say. Giving free retreat to Keldeo is really, really strong. It means we don't have to worry about special conditions, we don't have to worry about Lysander, anything like that. So yeah, it's kind of a weird list. It definitely looks kind of weird. But if you sit down and think about all of the card choices, all of them do make sense. And whilst like on first glances, it does look like a really oddball list. When you do sit down and think about it, it does a lot more. Most of the card choices do make sense. There are a couple of things that you perhaps would change, but all of them do make sense to the overall strategy of the game, or of the deck, which is building up a huge Rainbow Force and then pretty much dealing with anything in your way. So I'm going to jump into a battle and see if I can show off some fun with the Rainbow Force Xerneas, and the deck has been called Rainbow Road. Okay, so we've got ourselves a game here against Fry's XTR Salt. There was Dark and Water, so maybe a Yveltal deck. I could probably see a Yveltal deck, especially with this Yveltal coin here as well. So we may be seeing that up next. We are going to go first, just because it's always useful to get these Pokemon out first. And we do start with Xerneas, which is really nice, especially with that resistance to Dark, if he is playing some sort of Dark type. Looks like it's a fan, so we are going to say it's Jack, and he will indeed be getting a little bit of a shout out on YouTube. So hello Fry's XTR Salt if you do see the video. So our opponent is... Oh, that's really nice. You don't know how much we appreciate this. Just seeing things like this. He said how much he enjoyed the videos. It's really nice just to see sort of other people seeing our videos, which is it's just so cool, so humbling. And it looks like we've got a Darkrai and a Remoraid, so a pretty interesting deck. Okay, so what we're going to do, the Druddigon, there wasn't any lightning, sorry, colorless types, so we could discard the Druddigon. I'm trying to work out why I want to discard it. Okay, I'm going to go for the Ultra Ball, discard the Fighting and the Juniper, because we have access to VS Seeker, and I am going to grab... Landorus could be really useful here. So I think I'm going to grab Shaman, just because we have a lot of insta-play cards in our hand. Yeah, I'm going to grab Shaman, though knowing Landorus is in the deck is going to be really useful. I'm going to drop the Druddigon down, and the Skyfield down. And then use the Shaman for 4 cards. And then, okay, so we do get a Fairy Energy, which is nice. I don't think we're going to get much value out of Energy Switch here, which is really annoying. I think I'm going to attach... I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to attach to the Xerneas, then Ultra Ball, a Fairy, and then like an Energy Switch or something, and go for a... Yeah, go for a Ho-oh, to then discard with the Juniper, and then go for a Rebirth as well this turn, just try and get some more energy on the board. This deck does require a lot of thought on my end, so I feel, just because I don't feel as confident as I do with some of the other decks that I profile. Like, this is a list that I haven't been playing with as long as some of the other decks that I personally profile. So I do sometimes have to just double check in my mind that I think I'm doing the right play. So we're going to go for the Ho-oh. I didn't want to discard the another Fairy there, even though we did get a DCE, because the Ho-oh only gets 3 different types of basic energy. So I couldn't be sure. We did get a Battle Compressor, so it is we did get another type of basic energy, which is fair enough. But you know, these things happen. It's not always like certain that you're going to. So I don't think it was a particularly bad play. I'm going to go for the Fan Club. Actually, I think we're going to go for the Colress here, because we are going to build up a pretty big bench. And then the second Ho-oh as well, just so we have 2 outs to use Rebirth. Going to drop both of them. We're not going to drop them down. We'll just see if we get any Rebirth heads first. We get a Tails on the first one, which is unfortunate. Hopefully we get a Heads on the second one. But if not, it's not too much of an issue, because we do have access to being able to attack next turn anyway. We do get the energy though, which is really nice. So there's now 3 energy on Ho-oh, and you can start to see how we have really quick energy acceleration with this deck. I'm going to bench both of these, and I'm also going to I'm going to hold an energy switch here, just because I don't know whether I'm going to want to retreat with this Xerneas or attack with it yet. Depending on whether we can draw something with Colress next turn will depend on whether I want to attack with it or not. We may use the double colourless and just attack with it, but we do have access to be able to free retreat with it with the dark energy as well. So it will depend basically on what our opponent does and whether we have a way to be able to knock out this Darkrai next turn. So he benches a Yveltal and goes for a Laser. So finding the Keldeo here will be really important, especially as he got the heads as well. At the moment, losing Skyfield doesn't lose too much value, which is fine. But it's okay if... but yeah, if we do, it is another card that we need to find. And we do stay asleep, which is really unfortunate. Okay, we get the Colress, which means we can indeed Colress for 7 here. Unfortunately, we are going to have to shuffle the energy switch back in, but that's okay. If we manage to grab the Keldeo and an energy switch, we're going to be in really good shape. So we're going to go for the Colress for 7 cards, and we get the Execute and the Jirachi. Okay, unfortunately we don't get the Keldeo. I must admit I didn't actually see whether it was in the deck. It might even be prized. Okay, it's not prized. That is definitely something I should have checked, I must admit. But I'm just going to get... let's see how much energy in the discard. I don't think there's any energy in the discard. I might... I might get some more energy in the discard just so we can rebirth if we need to. Though that being said, getting some of these techie supporters is also going to be really useful. So yeah, let's go for that instead. Let's just get 3 supporters in there for now, just because they could all be useful at different points in the game. Unfortunately, we did attach the DCE here. We had to kind of just to make sure we didn't lose. We had access to attack if we did find the Keldeo and the energy switch. I think here we are going to pass the turn though. There's no reason to bench the other 2 Pokemon for now, just because they're going to get discarded if he manages to bounce the Skyfield. We do wake up, so he will have to use another laser if he wants us to keep us asleep next turn. I'll let him know I'm recording for the video, so he can hear his shout out if he does indeed want to. Oh, it's blocked. That's really annoying. Okay, fair enough. We do stay awake, and we do have access to kill this Darkrai here, because Rainbow Force is doing 10 plus 150 because of the 3. With the Muscle Band, that's 180, so we don't actually even need to grab any more energy, bench any more Pokemon. And we have the VS Seeker to grab Lysander. Okay, let's do that. Unfortunately for our opponent, we do have access to take his energy off the board. Which is really unfortunate, but this is kind of what the deck does. It's really, really strong to be able to do this. And we do take our first 2 prizes. So obviously Xerneas is really, really good at sort of prize trading with EXs, so we want to see EXs pretty much all day, and any more EXs he ventures in this game will definitely be high priority targets for us. He said he's had a pretty rough start, which I can definitely see that he has, which is really, really unfortunate for him. He does get the tails, but we get the computer search, so we may have a way of being able to I think we discarded the Fan Club, so we can go for VS Seeker for Fan Club to get the Keldeo, and then Computer Search for an Energy Switch to rush in and free retreat. I think that's the play. So we're going to discard the Execute just because it's like a free discard and we can get it back whenever we need it. And I think the N here. And then we're going to grab an Energy Switch. I decided to keep the Jirachi over the N just because we can then search the deck for a supporter, though pretty much all of our supporters are in the discard now, so maybe I should have kept the N, but oh well. So yeah, we are going for the Fan Club to grab ourselves the Keldeo, and I could grab the Smeargle here as well. Do we have the Shaman is on bench, so we don't need to grab the Smeargle, so we may as well grab a different Pokemon instead, a different type instead. Let's drop both of these. I'm going to leave this bench slot open just in case we do use the Jirachi. We'll attach the DCE and then use an energy switch. We can energy switch the Dark onto the Keldeo, and then use Rush In to get rid of the poison and get us out of sleep as well. This is pretty much what the Keldeo is in here for, just to be able to stop status conditions like this slowing us down. And then go for Rainbow Force, taking another knockout, which is 240 damage, grabbing us an energy switch. So he does need a bench Pokemon here. So he does say GG. It is unfortunate. But hopefully that kind of showed you how quick Xerneas can get set up. I know it wasn't the most interesting of battles, but it does show you sort of what the deck can do. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions about the deck, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Me and Joe will definitely respond to them as soon as possible. Obviously, all of the comments we get, we do respond to as quickly as possible, and Joe does have even more experience with this deck than I, so one of us will respond and try and give you some advice if you have any questions about the deck or anything. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and I will see you in another video.